Hey friend, buckle up for a deep episode because today we're diving into a big topic that the Lord has been refining us in for a while now. It truly doesn't matter who you are, this episode is for you. We believe that we are all in process when it comes to our relationship with Jesus, but it is so easy to strive to look and be perfect to others around us. We dive deep into how we can overcome this idea of upholding the perfect reputation and just simply living in process of becoming more like Jesus. If you're ready to break down some walls and hear some truth, let's dive in. Welcome to the Refined Sisterhood podcast. We are your hosts, Maddie and Kate, and we are here to chat about all things motherhood, faith-infused entrepreneurship, and lots of real life. We want you to leave feeling loved, encouraged, and a whole bunch of excitement for where the Lord has you right in this moment. We are so glad you are here. So grab your coffee, matcha, tea, whatever makes you happy, and let's hang out and indulge in some joyful conversations. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Refined Sisterhood podcast. Maddie and Caitlin here, and we are so excited for today, and we're ready to get deep. It is going to be a good, deep conversation all about process over perfection, and it's going to be really good. And, you know, it's been a hot minute since we had like one of these deep conversation Jesus episodes. And these are the ones we live for because we could talk for hours, but we're going to try not to bore you to death. But anyways, we're really excited because this is a topic that we feel really passionate about and that we feel like the Lord has truly refined us in this year. And especially me, I feel like it's something I've been really learning and tuning into. So I'm really excited. How are you feeling, Maddie?
I'm excited. I agree. We haven't had like a deep conversation like this yet in season 2. And Caitlin and I literally live for these conversations, just like she said. And it's also, like she said, we've been, like the Lord has been refining us in this. But we don't ever speak on something that like we have not necessarily walked through before. And so this is something the Lord has really been teaching us this year, this summer. And so we're excited to just kind of talk about where we are, because we have not mastered this at all by any means. But we're excited.
Yeah, for sure. So we're just going to dive right on in. And basically where we're going to start is just by saying becoming like Jesus is a process. In today's world, I think it's easy to just want to be and look perfect to everyone. And I know we've had conversations about perfection before and about like the image that we put off on social media and things like that. But specifically, we just want you to know, and we need to remind ourselves every single day that like being like Jesus is not being perfect. It's not being better than someone else. It's being in a process of becoming more like him every single day. And that looks different for everyone. And I think sometimes it's really easy to get in your head about like, oh, well, that person sins that way, but I don't do that. And so I'm better than them, or like, you know, whatever. But like in reality, we're all living in a different relationship with Jesus, and they're all going to look different because we go through different things. We have different experiences. We struggle with different sins, and stuff like that. And so, it's becoming like Jesus is a process, and it's not something where you just are perfect overnight.
Yes, for sure. I'm really excited to talk about this because Caitlin and I went to a women's conference back in like May, I think. Yeah. And this is actually somewhat of the topic that was talked about. And I think in today's world, we, like you said, we strive for perfection. We've talked about this before, like what we look like, our relationships, our social media, so many things. We want it to look perfect. And like, when did that happen? You know, like when did we feel like everything had to be perfect? And as I get older, I start to realize, like, which they talked about this at the conference of, you know, if we are putting off this perfection, like we are perfect, our lives are perfect, we can't be vulnerable and transparent with what we're walking through, then like, how is that meeting or reaching anyone for Jesus? You know, because they're just like, I want to be like Maddie and Caitlin, or I want to be like X, Y, and Z, because they think that our life is perfect. Yeah. But when in reality, it's not. So they're striving for something that is not even like what they're thinking.
Yeah,
know?
Exactly. And I think one thing, especially our generation, I'm almost 26, Maddie is 26. I think that we were raised to uphold a reputation. Like that was always what I was told. Like, remember who you represent, whether that meant Jesus or my parents or the church or whatever. We were raised to uphold a reputation. And I think that in a lot of ways, that is a good thing. Like you want to have a good reputation, but I think in ways it can go a lot deeper in a negative way. And you start thinking, oh, like I have this image, like I have a reputation to uphold. I have to look perfect. And then you wind up hiding the things that you're struggling with or faking it or whatever. And it kind of makes us build up this wall inside of like not wanting to be real with people and not wanting to like explain like, oh, I'm going through this. And maybe it's something that's you're like ashamed of, or like you feel shame because of it. And now you can't share it because you have a reputation to uphold. And so we're so quick to like put off the perfect image, and we just want people to think we're fine. But like, and that is like me, like that is me growing up. Like I never wanted anyone to think anything was wrong with me. I wanted to be like, you know, I don't need help. I don't need anything. Like I just need to help other people. And so that has been something the Lord has really been teaching me is, you know, I don't have to always be fine. I don't have to always be perfect. And all these things that I struggle with, other people struggle with them too. It's just, we literally were raised to put on the image of being perfect. And then it just got worse with social media, obviously.
Yeah. I've definitely heard uphold what's your reputation? Uphold that reputation, whether it was Jesus, my last name. Like, you know, we've talked about that before. And like Caitlin said, eventually it can do a lot of damage because you're thinking like, I mean, okay, we all are teenagers at one point. We're all not perfect as much as we like to think that we are. You know, we walk through things, even as adults, we're like, we live in a sin-fallen world. We sin every day, whether our sin looks different than my sin looks different than Caitlin's. Caitlin's sin looks different than me. My sin looks different than yours.
Public versus private. Like some sins are public, some sins are private.
But we all sin. And that is the unfortunate truth because, like I said, we live in a sin-fallen world. And I wish that it wasn't that way, but that's how it is. But because of that, and we're trying to uphold this reputation. To be quite honest, it happens behind closed doors. You know, like those sins are going to be like, we're going to try to hide them. Yeah. And one thing I've learned is like, you know, if I'm putting off this image of like, I'm this godly person and like my marriage is perfect, I have the perfect life, like all this stuff, but I am not living out a testimony of Jesus behind closed doors, and someone sees that, or I'm like somewhere and I just have a bad attitude, like I'm at a restaurant and I like take something out on the waitress, or I'm just like checking out somewhere and I have a bad attitude, they're not going to see Jesus in me at all. They're actually going to be like, oh my gosh. And if they know me on Instagram or how I portray my life any other way, they're going to be like, well, I don't want to be like her because she said, or I don't want to like follow Jesus because she says she does, but that's how she treats people. Like, or they see my sin. And then they're like, okay, well, now I'm hurting my testimony, you know, as a Christ follower. And so trying to uphold that reputation and hide it and trying to be perfect, actually, like you said, really does do a lot of damage, even damage that we don't even know. Like I said, it can go way farther than someone just looking at my life from the inside out and being like, okay, well, that's kind of off that she did that. And now like I'm confused, or now I don't want to follow Jesus. And, that's not how I want it at all.
Yeah. And I think like you have the damage that it does to people on the outside, but also on the inside yourself. And I feel like one of the things that it can do the most damage with is the fact that like we start believing, once we put off this image of like perfection and like, like faking it till you make it, like we start to believe that we are that perfect image. And then we start judging others because we're like, oh, well, I'm not like that. And no one knows like what my like garbage is that I'm dealing with. And then like you look at other people's sins and you're like, wow, that's public. And that's bad. Like they're bad.
Yeah.
They're going through something, and like you start judging people. And I feel like being judgmental of others, like you start looking at them in a negative way because of their imperfection, and you start thinking of yourself as better than them, when in reality, like there are no good people. Like we are all bad people in need of a savior. Like, and that's just the truth. Is like no sin is greater than another. And I know that is one of those things that like can be an argument, but I fully believe like no sin is greater than the other. And that even if like my sin might not be as public or as detrimental to other people or whatever, like it's still equal, and it's not fair of us to look upon others with judgment just because we're like upholding our own perfect reputation.
Yeah.
And no one really knows what we're actually going through.
Yeah, for sure. Like I agree. I believe that all sins are equal, but we have like manipulated our mind to believe that I'm just going to be honest, like that premarital sex, if someone gets pregnant and we see that, we have manipulated our mind to believe, because it's very public, right?
Yep.
We've manipulated our mind to believe that that is worse than gossip. But when in reality, we can sit behind a closed door all day long and talk crap about somebody.
Yep.
And no one sees that but the people that are having that conversation. And we think that because that person got pregnant and they're not married, that's just so much worse.
Exactly. Exactly. And we're so quick to like judge those people until it happens like close to you, or, you look at, I don't know. I've had so many instances where I'm around Christ following people that I either looked up to or I, thought good things about them. And then they made a comment that was so judgmental or just so like they are holier than thou. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And I'm not saying I'm not guilty of this, because I absolutely am. I'm definitely guilty of this. And I hate saying that. Like I've had moments where I look at people and I'm judgmental, and that's not okay. But like, I just know I've been in those instances, and I'm like, I can't believe that person just judged them like that. But then I like look at myself and I'm like, have I done something like that? And we're probably the world's worst going out in public. Like you go to Walmart and this is just like a funny one. Like you go out and like you judge a book by its cover. You go into Walmart and you're going to see like all of the things. But like we're so quick to just think, oh, we're better because we were raised this way. Or, we found Jesus when we were 6 years old versus that person who found Jesus when they were 26 years old, and they've got all this baggage and we don't have that because like, no, like regardless, like it just sucks that we judge others the way that we do. And it's like our natural tendency, because in the Bible, like Jesus never looked upon people with judgment. Like he would walk up to those people who we stand back and look at sometimes and judge. And he would actually like walk up to them and have a conversation with them, and would never say a word to make them feel less than. He just like addressed them in love. And you think about like the woman at the well and, casting like him writing in the sand, like whoever hasn't sinned, like cast the first stone. And, who are we to cast stones at people, even if they're non-believers? Like we don't get to cast stones because we're just as bad and sinful as they are.
Yeah. God, Caitlin's over here preaching. I don't even know what to say. I'm just like, okay, bye.
That's it. That's a wrap.
See you next Wednesday. No, but seriously, like I think that when we went to that conference and she was talking about how somewhere we've got it wrong, where we would rather walk into a church and act like our life is perfect rather than say, you walk into church and be like, I need prayer. Like, my child is suicidal or my child is on drugs. Like, you just feel like you can't walk in. We've like got it all wrong. We feel like we can't walk into church and be vulnerable. And so at church, I serve in the prayer room. And there's been so many times where they've asked for prayer, and I will literally give the most surface level answer for myself. Like, if they ask me, Maddie, what can we pray for you about? I'll be like, oh, this little thing. And I'm like, why did I act like that? Like, why couldn't I get deeper? And it's something that, like, I guess it has been instilled in me, or this perfection image where I'm like, I just can't get that vulnerable with people.
Exactly.
Like, you know, and it's sad because how are we supposed to do life and community with people if we can't get like transparent and we can't really break down those walls and get vulnerable and like just it not be a fun conversation, you know, necessarily. But through that, I mean, those are the times where we need to be vulnerable. Those are the times when we need to have the conversations when we are walking through like some really hard sin or whatever. It's just we like to put on this perfection mindset of I am better and I don't need to talk about these things because it is what it is. It's fine. And I don't want people to know my sin, or I don't want people to know the hard things that I'm going through.
Yeah.
And that's not doing any good, nor is that nor are we acting and embodying the image of Jesus by doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of times, I mean, this stems from many things, but I feel like a lot of times our most shameful sin, like, is something that we would never want to like share in church because, like I said, it's those same church people that you're standing with and they like judge someone and you're like, wow, like, are they going to judge me like that if I'm vulnerable? And like, to not be able to walk into church. I mean, church is a hospital for the sick. It is not for the healthy because none of us are Jesus.
Yeah.
But because of church people, in quotes, the ones who put on the perfect image, like, those people are not the ones that you want to even share, like, get vulnerable with. And so, like, there's so much when there's shame, like, of course you're not going to want to share. And then, I don't know, I feel like it's this vicious cycle of, you know, you want to have this perfect reputation, and then you go to church and you want someone to share something with you, but like you're too busy judging them, and then they think you're judging them, and then like it's just like a vicious cycle, and it shouldn't be that way because I feel like Jesus was never that way. He was always there. He always listened, and he always loved well, regardless of like what the situation was. And I know a lot of people deal with church hurt too, and I have a couple of friends who have, and church hurt is one of those things where, you know, you get hurt by people who are in leadership roles at the church and stuff. And then it keeps them from being able to even want to go back to church or want to share anything with people who claim to love Jesus because of that. And that just, it really stinks that, you know, that's also one of the reputations we have as Christians is like being holier than thou and not caring about anyone else and like thinking that we're so much better. Because at the end of the day, like at the beginning, I said we're all in process. And I feel like that's something that most people, when they come to know Jesus, they think, oh, well, I got saved. And a lot of people just leave it at that. And then they think, oh, changed overnight. I'm perfect. I'm fine. Like no one needs to know anything else that I do from here on out. When in reality, like we keep sinning. And it's unfortunate, but we keep sinning when we get saved. When we fall in love with the Lord, regardless, every single day, I mess up. I say things I shouldn't. I act ways that I absolutely should not. I get in a bad mood and I treat like you said, like a waitress or something like that bad. And then I feel so guilty. And it's just crazy to me how like the Lord has truly like shown me, you know, Caitlin, you've messed up in these places and you have, one, not been vulnerable with people, but you've also not allowed other people to be vulnerable with you because you think you're better. And not that anyone maybe looks upon me that way, but obviously it's like, when it comes down to it, it kind of comes down to like a pride issue. So
For sure. And when we are not being vulnerable, how do we expect someone else to be vulnerable with us? And I know when I've had those hard conversations where I've talked about something that I've kept private or a sin that I've struggled with, and I've just been vulnerable and open about it, always from that conversation has always come such like good follow-up conversations with those people, and they feel so loved and so full of like peace walking through whatever they're walking through. And like we said, and what this whole episode is process over perfection. And so when I have those conversations with people and I get vulnerable and they get vulnerable with me, it allows me to walk alongside them in life and be in community and encourage them and help them navigate this season without any judgment, and also just like giving them so much grace and seeing what true grace looks like. That is a characteristic of Jesus. And so when they think back to their experience with someone that loves Jesus and they just felt so loved and encouraged and like so much grace upon them from us because the Lord gave it to us, then they're willing, like their life is going to be forever changed because of us being willing to get vulnerable. And so, we are all in process and we're all working through something. And if you're not, you're lying.
Oh,
you're
lying for sure. For sure.
We are all imperfect and we are all sinners in need of a savior.
For sure. And I think one of the things she was talking about having conversations. So a couple episodes ago, I mentioned that the Lord was teaching me that like there is purpose in one-on-one conversations. And I think one of the best places for us to be in that process is not just in private with the Lord, but also with those people who maybe do look at you and think, wow, like they have it all together, because maybe they don't see what's actually going on in your life, and get really deep and get really vulnerable with them and get on their level. That's one thing that I've noticed is like, if I'm struggling and someone comes to me and wants spiritual advice, I want to make sure that they know, hey, I'm in process and I'm absolutely not even doing well enough to feel qualified to give you this advice or to talk to you about this, because I know I've gone through a season of like loneliness or feeling just empty. And sometimes in those empty seasons where you feel like you're not even connected to the Lord, someone wants to have a conversation with you. And I could sit there and be like, oh yeah, I'm doing great. Like, let me give you this advice and just give like the surface level advice, or even just know the right thing to say. But instead, I would much rather just look at that person and be like, look, to be quite honest, like I'm in a crappy, empty feeling season. I don't feel close to the Lord right now, or I do, or, wherever I'm at, and being really vulnerable with them and just saying like, I'm a human just like you are, and I struggle. It might be differently than you or the same as you, but regardless, I feel like even if we're in different places or we're in the same place, like we're both working towards becoming more like Jesus. And I feel like those conversations are the ones that, like you said, are the most like filling, and you feel the Lord so like strongly in those moments, because instead of trying to put on a front, you are just trying to be in community with people who are trying to be like Jesus with you.
Yeah. And I think when we break down those walls and we allow humility to be the forefront of our heart, I think that they can be the hands and feet of Jesus.
Oh, for sure. I don't know. Since the beginning of this year, I feel like this is just one of those topics that has really been like, the Lord has been like, Caitlin, you need to work on this. Like, you need to really come to a place where like you're in process and you're not just like put on a pedestal. And, with what we do, it sometimes looks hard because, we do a podcast that's a Christian podcast, and we want to be encouraging and uplifting, and we want to be loving. And a lot of times I feel like that could come across as like, we're always happy-go-lucky and excited and joyful for Jesus, and we don't go through anything hard, even though we do share a lot of hard things on this podcast. That's kind of the point. But I feel like sometimes it can look like we're just handling it all really well. But at the end of the day, like there are many, many days where we don't always handle things well and we're not perfect. And, you know, as podcasters, Christian podcasters, we want you to know, like, we are in process just as much as you, and we're going to fail. You'll probably see us fail. And we want people to know, like, we're going to fail. And it sucks to admit that sometimes because of the world we live in. Failure is one of those things where people look at you and like they judge you for it or whatever. But me and Maddie have had this conversation before. It's those failures and those moments of shame that when the Lord meets you right there, eventually, once you have come out of it or once you have like given it to him or whatever, like those are the moments that like he uses for other people in their lives. And I really strongly believe that this is one of those things that our generation needs, is to remember that we're in process and we're not perfect. And we are absolutely not better than anybody else just because our sins are hidden in a closet while other people's are public. And so, yeah, this is just one of those things we really, really feel passionate about. And we hope you know that, like, if this touched you in any way, or if you're like walking through a season of like, you know, I kind of suck. Like, if you really just feel like you're not being the Christian that you're supposed to, just know that you are right there with all of us. Like, none of us are the Christians that we're supposed to be because none of us are perfect. And it's not a bad thing to strive for perfection sometimes because Jesus was perfect. And ultimately, we are striving to be like Jesus. But perfection is just not possible on this side of heaven. It's just simply not. This is not our home. We cannot be perfect here, and there is no reason to act like we can be.
Yeah. Caitlin, you are killing this episode.
Thanks.
Before we leave you, I just thought of this idea where I think you need to leave with some tangible, you know, advice of maybe you're sitting there and like Caitlin said, you're like, oh my gosh, I suck. Like, start having those conversations. You don't have to get perfect to start having those conversations. You need to hear that, because I am that person where I feel like I have to get everything in order before I even start having the conversation.
A whole outline. We have to write an outline.
Exactly. That is literally my brain, but it's so not true. And if you just start, like, the Lord is going to use that. And two, you don't suck. We are all in process and you're not alone, and you are doing great things, and show yourself grace. Third, if you are sitting here and you're like, you know, this doesn't apply to me. I really feel like, you know, I don't really struggle with anything like this. Like, I really don't see where y'all are coming from. Like, maybe you're in that place of just like, you know, this doesn't resonate with me. Caitlin, a couple months ago, I remember she was saying that she was praying that the Lord would reveal the ugly parts of her heart to her.
Yeah.
And that's a hard prayer. I mean, none of us want to know the parts that we haven't discovered those ugly parts of our heart, but they're there. And we do them unintentionally. And so I encourage you, if you do feel like you resonate with this, or maybe you don't, and you're just like, you think you got it good, you think that this doesn't affect you or relate to you, I encourage you to just say that, like, pray that the Lord would reveal the not so pretty parts of your heart. And I know, like I said, it's not a fun thing to do, but I think when we have those vulnerable moments with Jesus and ask him to reveal those parts of our heart, I really think that he, through all of this, or through that prayer, I really think you've like learned a lot of what you've talked about.
Oh yeah, 100%. I've learned a lot, and praying that prayer, you're right. It's very hard, and it's hard to hear the answers. And sometimes you don't want to hear the answers. Yeah, it's a hard one. And a lot of times the Lord is going to reveal things to you that like you didn't even realize you were struggling with, or you didn't even realize was a sin in your life. It would never have been something you would have like talked to someone about or shared with someone about. Like, it's just one of those things that it's buried so deep that it's become a part of you, and you don't realize how like detrimental to you it actually is. And And so as you pray that prayer, we will be praying it with you. We are full believers in praying this often. And even though it hurts our pride sometimes, at the end of the day, like we want to be more like Jesus. And so in order to be more like him, we have to allow the Lord to reveal those ugly parts of our heart so that we can truly evaluate like the posture of our hearts and make sure that like we are moving in the direction of becoming more like Jesus and not just being stagnant or moving backwards. And so, I feel like this is one of those things where this was deep. It got real deep. And I feel like the Lord truly had to have touched someone listening to this, whether it's you or somebody else. We hope that we encouraged you in some way, shape, or form. And I feel like this just resonates with mostly everyone because we all are sinners in need of a savior. We're not perfect, even when we try to be. And we all want to become more like Jesus. So thank you so much for being here, for listening, and for getting deep with us and not turning us off yet. Because I know this is like one of those things where it's like, oh, that's hard to hear. That stings a little bit. But we know that the Lord can use it to refine you as well. And we pray that it does. If you are also looking for someone to have a deep conversation with, because you don't have anyone in your life to talk about things with, or maybe this just is something that you've struggled with and you really need someone to talk to, Maddie and I are here. Our DMs are always open. The Refined Sisterhood DMs are always open. And we are here for you. We're here to love you through it. And we are not here to make ourselves feel or look any better than you. We simply just want to encourage you and walk alongside you in whatever season you're in. So thank you so much for being here. We love you guys so much. We launch new episodes every Wednesday, so don't forget to come back next week. Join our Facebook group if you want some community. There's some good people over there, and you can find us and we can have good conversation. But yeah, we hope that you learned something and that you feel encouraged, and we will see you guys next week. Bye.
We had so much fun getting to hang out with you today, and we hope that you are feeling encouraged, loved, and full of purpose. If you've enjoyed today's podcast episode, we would absolutely love it if you would write us a review so that we can hear how we encouraged you. And if you haven't subscribed, go do that right now. Also, you can join the sisterhood by finding us on Instagram at The Refined Sisterhood. Okay, friend, we hope you have the best week, and we will see you in the next episode.